As I said, I'm Danny Townsend. I'm with Perfect Places, and I've been in business since 2005. I see one of my customers in the back. And anyhow, I'm basically here to give y'all information that y'all want. So if you have a question, please ask. Raise your hand. I'll call on you, and we'll do the best we can to answer your questions. Had about several last time I couldn't answer, so that's the way it goes. I'll do the best I can. But what we're trying to talk about today is healthy and sensible lawn applications, and a lot of that is based upon what you do as an individual, whether you have to use chemicals or not. And so I'm gonna focus on a little bit of that too today. If you have lawn applications, you'll see a sign that looks like that. If you have someone to come and treat your yard, they usually or should leave a sign that looks like this to caution people to come to your, don't walk in the grass, okay? Well, why do you do that? Well, basically anything that's applied as a chemical that's going to fertilize, kill a weed, kill a bug, prevent a weed, prevent a bug, any of that is not necessarily going to be toxic to you if you walk through it, but it's just a good idea to stay out of it. If it dries, then it's usually okay to go through it. You should be fine. I wouldn't let my young children or small pets play on it until you've watered it in. That's why every application that you have should say, water this in. And the reason they do that is to get everything off the leaf surface and get it into the soil where it belongs, if it belongs there. And then your grass and your turf, your shrubs, all that should be safe to get back into after that point. So that's just one caution. If you're doing the applications yourself, you should think about the weather. You should think about if I'm going to go out and fertilize organically or spray with this or do whatever. If it's going to pour down rain the next day, you're probably not going to be very effective with what you're doing. So watering it in is just in a small dose, and then it can water all it wants to after you've soaked it in. So first thing we're going to talk about, should you use chemicals in the landscape? A lot of POAs require that you have to maintain your yard to a certain standard. You live in a neighborhood that requires that, then you pretty much are obliged to do that. You've moved in, you've signed up for their POA rules, and you should abide by them. Some people will expect a little more than they should out of a treatment, okay? Are all bugs and weeds a problem? No, not necessarily. Some bugs and some weeds do a good job for you. You don't know, maybe you don't know what they are, but they do some things for you. One thing I want to talk about too is your site too risky for chemicals? A lot of people don't think about it. If you live on an older property or a rural property, you probably have a well somewhere, either on your property, even if you're not using it, there's a well somewhere. And that's a direct line to the water table underneath. And so I'm on a rural area and I have a well. And if you're applying chemicals, you need to think about your well. And if you're having your yard treated and it rains and water runs towards your well, then you could be contaminating your own water and someone else's water that's drinking out of the same well. So you need to think about those things. Same thing goes with chemical sensitivity. If you know you've got a neighbor whose husband, wife, child, or whatever has a compromised immune system or something like that, you probably ought to consider that when you're applying chemicals. Don't do it while the kids are outside. Wait till they go inside. If their dogs run around all over the place, ask them to put their dogs up. Endangered species. If you live in an area where there are endangered species, somebody asked earlier a question about frogs. Their garden club is particularly interested in saving some frog that's close to their property. I don't know which frog it was, but they were talking about that. And should applying chemicals be considered with that? Absolutely, absolutely. Anything that you apply directly around it or could run off or spray drift into it could cause a problem for some unsuspecting animal. And especially if it's protected. If it's a protected species and you're aware of it and you damage it, it could be a real problem for you. So, and even if you're not aware of it, it could be a problem. So consider those things and consider your site. The next thing is, we'll talk about your POA rules. Some neighborhoods require that you have a certain appearance of your turf. You can only plant certain species of grass and certain species of plants, and your landscape has to be approved. And if you're going to re-landscape your yard, make it more bird friendly or more animal friendly or more natives, or you want to go more organic. Some of those things are you're not able to do them because of where you live. I know in most of the neighborhoods in Chenal, they require that you plant zoysia grass. Okay, it's not an option. You have to plant zoysia grass in some of the neighborhoods. That's what's required. And so if you are planting zoysia grass, that grass has some particular problems. It is prone to large patch disease, and in the past 4 or 5 years when the weather's been so odd and erratic that we've had lately, especially in the winters when we have warm winters, this disease that attacks this zoysia grass is a problem. We end up having to treat and spray this grass over and over and over again to try to remedy the problem. If we planted Bermuda, we wouldn't have the problem at all. So, because of that POA requirement, there are chemicals being sprayed in those lawns that, probably shouldn't have to be that way. But if you've got it and it costs you a lot of money and it's already in, you want to save it, I understand. That's the way it should be. You should try to save your stuff if you can. Now, if you don't like the rules, join the board. And that's always a high-paying position with a lot of benefits to everyone on the board. I'm on a board and it pays nothing, and you get the complaints and very little glory.
Grief is a benefit.
It is. One of the things I'm going to talk about is weeds and pests, and they're only pests and they're only weeds if you say so. Just because a bug runs across your sidewalk doesn't mean you should kill it. Just because there's a weed in a flower bed doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. My landscape, I have let everything behind my landscape go natural because I love birds. And those areas are now places for the birds to go in and pick for bugs and pick for caterpillars and everything else. And then the caterpillars, they love all the milkweed and all that kind of stuff that's growing up out there. And so I have beneficial butterflies and bees and all that kind of stuff because I don't mess with those areas. Those weeds don't bother me. And my wife says that the weeds in the beds bother her, but they don't bother me as much as they do her. So anyhow, the pests, when you get into bugs, some bugs are actually beneficial to your landscape. And you don't have to go buy boxes of lady beetles to take care of your aphids if you have a natural balanced ecosystem. And one of the things I talked about in the last session, I'll talk about it here too, is don't plant monocultures. Don't go out and plant all of your landscape in one plant. If you're going to have a big windscreen between you and the neighbor, you should plant a multitude of plants that are similar in shape but have a different species in it. So you can plant these big cryptomerias, which is a Japanese cedar. You can plant those and plant magnolias in that same group. You can plant cypresses or arborvitae, that kind of thing, and break up that landscape. And the reason you want to do that is because an insect that feeds on arborvitae, say, and you've got 40 arborvitae in a row, is going to eat all the arborvitae. And it's going to be a host for the next group of arborvitae. They're going to lay their eggs in it, and the next group's going to get it. So, you've set yourself up for a population of insects or bugs or diseases because you've created a large environment for them. Okay? And if one of them dies in the group, if you've got 40 of them that look the same and one dies, it's hard to find the one that looks just like the rest of them. And you never can do that. And so if you've got a different species through that group, then you've got a better ability to replace it without it looking silly. And so that's one of the things you need to do. Pull your weeds possibly. Don't always just grab the can first thing. If you see some bugs, get the water hose, spray them off if you can. Sometimes that's all it takes. Some bugs and insects you can't remedy that way. Some diseases you can't take care of that way. And some weeds are too much to take care of that way. And so you need to but if you can, that's your first resort. Just go out there and pull it. I have customers that have called me for one weed in a yard. You sprayed my yard. I found nutsedge on the corner, and I need you to come get it. And it was easier for them to go pull the weed than it was to make the phone call. But here's the thing. They pay me to do that service for them. And if they want me to come pull that weed, I will pull the weed. But I'm not going to go spray it. I'll pull it myself too. So, but it makes more sense because it's easier just to go get it. And you shouldn't expect that when the treatment is done that there are no weeds. That's an impossibility, or we would never have to come back. You know, we have to do it multiple times if we're going to treat a yard. And the reason being is that there's different seasons, different cycles, different germination times for weeds, different bug infestations happen different times of the year. And so you have to do all of this stuff at different times of the year because of the seasons. Seasons change. Next thing, are you happy with your landscape? If you plant a Tuscan garden with all the plants of Tuscany in your landscape, you're not going to have a good result. Tuscany is arid, it's sunny, and it's mild, and it's beautiful, and it's all of those things, but it's not Arkansas. Arkansas is humid, it's wet at times, it's dry at times, it's cold at times, it's hot at times. And so if you plant Italian cypress and lavender and all of these plants that grow in Tuscany and are very beautiful, then you're going to have problems with them. You might be successful with them, and I've seen some really beautiful Italian cypresses that are growing here, but the majority of them don't do well because the humidity is too much for them, and our wet soils in the winter are too much for them. And it's generally the winter that gets them. They look great, and then when summer comes along, they start browning out and dying out, and that's because the root system was compromised over the winter because it was too wet. And so drainage is very important for those. So if you want to incorporate and have a landscape like that, you need to plan for it. You need to do all the extra work. Don't just run out there and stick them in the ground and say, have at it. You're going to be great. Unhealthy plants, some shouldn't be rescued. You know, if you've got photinias, the old red tips, you know, everybody's got those or had them at one time because they were the plant of the day back then. And they get a leaf spot disease and they generally die from it. Or they look so bad that you just probably ought to take them out anyways. You can spray them, and when I first started in the business, that's what they recommended. You spray them and 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 spray them. And then when you quit spraying them, they got the disease. So, you know, if you weren't, it's like arthritis in a plant. You know, you can take your pills, but as soon as you stop, you got it back. And that's the same thing with the plant. If you've got that problem, just eliminate the plant, find something else to put there. Leland cypress has been the new photinia. Okay, a lot of people have them in, and they get up to a size that's really big and beautiful, and then they start getting diseased. And it's usually when they're 35, 40 feet tall, and they're really doing the screening job that you wanted them to do, and now they're starting to die out limb by limb because they get a disease during the summertime. And so, anyways, and the Extension Service will give you some recommendations for them, and generally it's a lost cause. I had a customer that fired me over Leland cypresses. She had problems with her Leland cypresses, and I told her that it was probably just what I told y'all. It was probably a losing battle, and we shouldn't address them. She had another company come out and said they could fix them, and I drive by there and look at her magnolia trees now. They fixed it. But after they charged her a lot of money, and she spent a lot of money treating those cypresses, and then she ended up replacing them anyways. I still don't have the job, but I was right. So, anyways. Plant varieties are resistant to diseases and suited for your location. You know, that's the right plant, right location. That's one of the mantras of landscaping is do your research, look, study before you buy something. You know, look what it requires. The plant, you know, a lot of times the plant stuff, when you look at the little tag, it's not enough information to make a good decision just off the plant tag. So, you know, it's not a big trip back out here after you go, or you've got a phone. Most everybody's got a phone. They can look it up online and just look at where's this thing native to, and just think about where plants are native from. You know, if it's native to Arizona, probably not. If it's native to Georgia, probably all right. You know, and so that's one thing to think about. Also, too, it may not be a region that's the issue. It may be the microclimate that you're planting in. So if you buy dogwoods, which are understory plants, and you take and put them out at the front and center in the middle of your zoysia lawn at the front of your house, they might do okay. They might, but probably they won't. They'll probably sit out there and suffer. And in the summer heat, they will blister and the leaves will curl up and they'll be ugly. And you'll wonder why my dogwoods just don't look good. Well, they're not shaded in the afternoon like they'd like to be, and that's why. Same thing with a lot of Japanese maples. You see Japanese maples sticking out on the corner of a house, and some of them look good because they're getting some shade, and some varieties are better than others. You know, some Japanese maples will take full sun and be all right, but a lot of them will just burn even in the summer sun. So just be aware. All right. Next thing, be careful if you're spraying. You know, back to the chemical sensitivities and allergies. Watch for wells, cisterns, and ponds. Are you within a watershed? And that's something that anybody around Lake Maumelle is in a watershed. So what's a watershed? That's an area where all your yard and your area around it essentially drains into a drinking water area. Lake Maumelle is your drinking water for Little Rock. And so if you're spraying on the border of Lake Maumelle and your chemicals run off into the lake, then everybody in Little Rock can thank you for it. So think about that before you do something, you know. And if you're a proponent of having good drinking water, you probably ought to worry about when they talk about, hey, we're going to develop on the Lake Maumelle watershed. You probably ought to attend those meetings, voice your opinion if you're interested. You know, they're not going to listen to anyone if you don't raise the issue and voice your opinion. So it may not be important, it may not be something that you're worried about too much, but it's probably something you at least ought to keep your eye on, especially if you're in Little Rock. I'm not in Little Rock, I'm on a well. So next thing we're going to talk about is integrated pest management. That's the foundation of all pest control of any sort, okay? This is a triangle. Just think of it as a three-legged stool. The stool won't stand without one of the legs. We talked about the Leland cypress and removing them, the photinias and getting rid of them. The host is one of the legs. So if you just remove the thing that's diseased, then you don't have that problem. So sometimes that's the best solution to your problem. Sometimes it's the disease that you try to get rid of, but most likely you're not going to get rid of the disease completely. You generally will get the disease because it's ubiquitous. It's there. It's everywhere. It's a bag of bread. If you stick it in a warm, dark closet and you leave it there, you're going to get a moldy bag of bread. Why? Because you just created the environment that was good for that mold that was already on the bread to develop. So if you go out and you overwater your yard, you over-fertilize your yard, and you mow it infrequently, you're guaranteed to have disease. It's just going to happen. So that environment that you're creating is the problem. It's not that your yard guy isn't spraying, he's not doing his job well enough or whatever. If you have to have your yard be the greenest yard in the neighborhood, then that's part of the problem. That is part of the problem. Because your yard shouldn't be the greenest yard in the neighborhood. That's probably the most unhealthy yard in the neighborhood when it comes down to it. It is getting sprayed, it is getting aerated, it's getting all the things that you have to do to maintain a golf course when you don't have to do that. You can have a slightly less green yard and have a much healthier yard. And you can do that organically, or you can do that in other ways. You can do it. There are a lot of things that will help your yard and make it green without having to treat it 15 times a year, you know. The next thing, correct the culture and environment. 70% of your weed control in your grass is through mowing and taking care of it. If you mow your grass infrequently, you say you don't want to mow but every 2 or 3 weeks, what happens is the grass grows up to a height. And think of grass as just like you would a tree. You have leaves, you have stems, and you have roots. And if your tree gets tall and you cut it off and it turns brown, if your grass turns brown after you're mowing it, you're mowing too infrequently. You need to mow more often, because what you're doing is you're cutting off all the leaves. The leaves are the parts that produces the food for the plant. And when you cut all that off, then the plant has to draw food from what's stored in the stem. Well, if it's doing that, then it's not producing food for the roots. And so now you've got an opportunity for disease. You've got a plant that's struggling, and basically even if it's fertilized well and it's growing this much a week, it's still starving to death because it's just focusing all its energy on growing back. So if you want your grass to be 3 to 4 inches tall, which is pretty tall, but you should still mow it every week. You can't get out of weekly mowing by having tall grass if you want healthy grass. So, you know, when you have grass, mowing it every week, or sometimes more often if it's really hot and you're watering a lot, is what needs to be done to keep your grass healthy, because you're damaging it so much, cutting it so infrequently. And sometimes during the middle of the summer when it's 90 degrees and you're having to water every single day because you don't have enough soil depth to keep your grass alive. If you don't, then your grass goes bananas and you have to cut it more often. We do the Episcopal Collegiate Schools football fields. they want them cut at 1 inch of height on zoysia grass, which means that we have to mow that field 2 to 3 times a week to get that field cut like that, which also means I have to feed it and I have to water it way too much. And that field is probably looks beautiful, but it takes a lot of work to make it that way. And but that's the way it is when you have a field like that. And if you want your yard to be healthy, fertilize a little less, you can cut a little less that way, and then mow more frequently and you'll have a better yard. If you've gotten to the point where you've done all the good things, you're mowing your yard right, you're managing and everything, doing all the watering right that you think you need to do, and you're still having a problem with something, then that's when you need to look at spraying. You need to look at, well, we're going to control the weeds doing it this way. We're going to control the insects because we're having so much of a problem, that kind of thing. The organic lawns, we'll talk about that. This is basically the result that most people get with doing organic lawns. And most people that pay for people to do organic lawns get this result too, and they're not very happy with it. And I'm not saying you can't have success with an organic lawn. You can. But be prepared, it's work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than the other ways. The chemical companies develop these herbicides and insecticides and all these other sides to make things faster, easier, quicker, and speed up production and reduce work, okay? And they do those things. And so they work better. Not to say they're better, they just do that job better, okay? If you're gonna have organic weed control in your lawn, you can put out corn gluten meal, which is a good pre-emergent. That's a preventer. That's a preventative, pre-emergent that'll stop weeds from coming up. But understand that that's not a natural thing you're doing. Even when you're putting out organic materials, you're not putting them out in a natural way because they don't occur naturally that way. So if you put out pounds of organic corn gluten meal as a pre-emergent, that's not a natural behavior. The weeds are natural. The weeds are the most natural thing that's there. They come up on their own without any help. So you put out your corn gluten meal, it prevents the weeds from coming up, but you're still not going to get as good a results as if you used a inorganic herbicide method. I haven't pre-emerged or fertilized my yard in about 4 years. I do this for a living because the weeds don't bother me so much. I just mow them out, and by midsummer I don't have any weeds. Basically they're all gone because they pop up this time of year. They grow for a short period of time. They have a short life cycle. If you mow them often enough, they die out, they don't survive, and they're gone. The trick is don't let them get tall enough this time of year that they can seed and put down seed for next year.
So you mow this time of year?
Absolutely. If you got weeds, get rid of them. Mow them, get rid of them. Because right now, those weeds have different cycles. That's why you have all these weeds popping up right now, is because they germinate. As soon as the weather is warm, they take the opportunity. They germinate, they come up, and they take this springtime weather to their annuals. They grow, they reproduce, and they die in a season. And so you've got to get them in that season. If you miss that opportunity, they'll be back next year just as well. And there's weeds for all seasons. There's summer weeds, crabgrass. You've got henbit for springtime. You've got poanna or bluegrass in the winter. So you've got weeds for all your seasons. And there's always an opportunist out there wanting to take over your yard. And it will. So that's why you have to do these treatments more than once, because you have more weeds than once. So if you're going to do an organic treatment on your yard, or you're going to do a regular treatment on your yard, you have to do it more than once. You can't do it once and then say, I did it, it's done. No, they'll be back. The crabgrass starts germinating in May, and it's a problem. If you don't have your corn gluten meal out at the right time when the winter, the nighttime temperatures for crabgrass needs to be about 55 degrees. And we've had some 50-degree nights already, okay? The good thing is it won't survive a frost, or you'd already have crabgrass. So some of the crabgrass has already germinated and been killed by frost, and it's not there anymore. But as soon as it gets warm again, it'll come back up. And if you're not on your timing with your pre-emergence, then you're going to have weeds. You're going to have that problem crop up. And so we don't use any organic pre-emergence because we don't have the ability to be at your yard right then. We've got too many customers for that. You can. You can look at the weather and say, it's about that time. I think I need to go out and put some preventative out there so that I don't have this weed problem, and then that'll stop your problem. But if you put out, there's this all season stuff that River Valley sells has prodiamine in it, and it's a good pre-emergent to stop basically most all of your weeds, and it has the least environmental impact of most of them. And I would recommend you use something like that if you're going to do it yourself. Soil tests, okay? One thing you need to look at in soil test is that's the basis for your yard. If you don't know what your soil is like, then you have no idea where to go. If you can take your soil, put it in a little box, take it down to or a bag or whatever, take it down to the local extension office, and for free, they'll test it and tell you what you need to do to your yard to make it healthier. You need to give it, somebody asked earlier, should I take a different sample for my flower beds and my grass? Yes, because you're growing two different things. And you need to tell them on the list, what am I growing here? Am I growing azaleas or am I growing clematis, or what am I doing here? Am I growing fruits and vegetables? You need to tell them that, and that way they'll tell you what to adjust your soil to. And they'll tell you whether you need lime or you need sulfur or what it is, or fertilizer, And then, like I said, that's free. Every time a bag of fertilizer is bought, there's a tax on that goes to pay for that. So use it, please use it. These ratios of nitrogen for your grasses, you really can't buy an organic fertilizer that has that ratio for your grass. There's nothing out there really that's organic that has that high of nitrogen in it, unless you're using like raw chicken manure. And that does, and then you got to be real careful with that, and it's smelly, and it's not something I recommend. But you can get some pretty good fertilizers organically for your lawn that'll take good care of it. Mulching your grass is a really good thing for fertilization. Everybody thinks that builds thatch in the lawn. It does not. If you mulch your grass, it's going to put back moisture, it's going to put back nutrients, and you're going to have a healthier lawn for it. We don't pick up any grass. People ask me, are you going to bag my grass? No. The only grass we're taking home is what was stuck to our feet. All your grass is staying there. We're not taking it home. That's it. We're not going to, and we don't do it for any of our customers. Even the Episcopal school, we don't bag that grass. And it looks fine. Water when you need to and not on a schedule. That's really hard for people with an automatic sprinkler system. If you've got an automatic sprinkler system, you got it set to water Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's what it does. That's watering on a schedule. And that's better than not watering on a schedule, okay? In that if you don't have the time and you don't have the wherewithal to stay at home, watch your grass, test how much water's in there, make sure that it's all perfect all the time, then that's a better alternative. But if it's rained for 3 weeks and then and your sprinkler comes back on or you turn it back on, that's not necessarily a good thing. The yard has been watered deeply at that point, and it may take 3 or 4 weeks before you need to water again. But it quit raining, you flip the switch back on, it's watering again. And so that's not necessarily a good thing. They do have, and they have come out with an improvement over the old timer sprinkler system, which is a smart controller. And it measures the rainfall, it measures the temperature, and it has all these settings on there that tells you what zone is and how much shade it is, how much soil type, slope, all of that. You plug all that in there and it waters better. It's still not perfect. I've got one of those and I still have to turn it off occasionally because it still doesn't water as well.
Ask a question, Danny.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know if this had been asked earlier, but the theory of watering deeply, kind of like the saturated rain for 2-3 weeks. Can you water so deeply, 3-4 inches on a zoysia lawn, and then you don't water but once a week? Or?
That's very possible. And I'm glad you brought that up because there are some locations, the Extension Service will recommend that you water deeply and infrequently. And you hear that mantra over and over and over again. That is absolutely true. I'm not going to dispute that. If you've got enough soil. Most people don't have enough soil. If you live on a residential lot in a neighborhood, 99% you don't have enough soil because soil costs money and landscaping is the last thing that gets done and we're over budget. And so dirt is underneath everything. You can't see it, so just put enough out there that we said we put some dirt out. Let's go. And that's what happens. And you go out there, a lot of times I have seen, there's a neighborhood in Chenal called Salone, and we have a yard in Salone. And they had a sprinkler leak in the yard. And when the sprinkler exploded, the sod bubbled up like a big waterbed. And the reason it did that is because the grass wasn't rooted after 5 or 6 years of being in place. And we cut a hole in the waterbed, found the pipe, and there was no soil. The grass was growing on top of shale and slate rock, and they have to water basically daily to keep that yard alive during the summer. That's not healthy, but it's the only way they're keeping their grass alive. And so if they watered once a week, they wouldn't have a yard to worry about. So some situations you have to water every day because it's just that way. And as it gets hotter in the season, and you're one of them.
Also, if you're on a hill, it all runs off.
Yeah, that's true. If you're on a hill like she is, it all runs off too. So if you water for 3 hours on a hill, you just watered the neighbor. That's all you did. You just ran it down the hill. You just caused a problem. So the smart controllers, what they do is they cycle and soak on a hill. If you tell it it's on a hill, it'll come on and run for 10 minutes and then go off for an hour and come back on an hour later and water for 10 more minutes. And that's the way to water a hill, is to water it multiple times and try to get that water in there that way. Aerate and top dress. That's one of the biggest things for healthy grass, is if you'll aerate your lawn at least once a year, it'll make a dramatic difference in how well your grass does. Top dressing, we usually do that after we've aerated because it allows the nutrients from compost that we're putting back on the soil, on the turf, to get down in all those holes that we made through aeration.
So you're putting compost.
Yeah, I would use
Top of the grass.
compost or a really rich soil. A really rich soil. You know, some kind of organic material. Like this super soil that River Valley sells or you can get from American Composting. That's a good material to use because it's got sand and compost both in it. And it's really good for top dressing and filling in all the holes and voids. Yes, sir.
What's the best thickness to top dress?
That's going to depend on your grass and the density. Like Bermuda grass, you could top dress a lot thicker than you could zoysia grass because the Bermuda grass has a higher ability to come through it. But I would just top dress enough to when you're finished with it and you've brushed it all in, you can't see it anymore. And the trick is to do that infrequently or frequently, so like once or twice a year, do that rather than go out there and try to put 4 inches on top of it to make your grass better all of a sudden. You know, it's like anything. Moderation is a key with that. And you can kill your grass with top dressing it too. You can dump so much dirt on it, it can't grow through it. You know, and so,
What's
yeah.
the best way to aerate your grass? I make it have an acre.
Right.
I can't walk around with little spiky shoes all over that.
No, you can't.
I have to hire somebody or a machine.
Well, the best thing that I've seen for large areas like that, short of buying a $15,000 aerator, is to buy these pull behind for your lawnmower type aerators. And you can buy them at Home Depot. They're only like about $120. And basically they've got a spike that runs down in the ground. You put sandbags or concrete blocks or something on the little thing and you drive around with it and it pokes holes in the ground. What we do is we have a commercial aerator that is basically like a 21-inch lawnmower. You walk behind it and it pokes holes in the ground. And it's hard work. It's much harder than mowing grass. Our guys, when we tell them, hey, you got to go aerate a yard, they're like, oh, I hate you. Because it's hard work. It's not fun. I mean,
It
because,
costs a lot of money.
yeah, it's labor intensive. I mean, I just quoted someone that has about a football field size area that they want to aerate, and it was almost $600. So, and that's running it 2 different directions. And it basically takes all day to do that size of an area, you know.
And
But-
you can rent one, can't you?
You can rent one from Home Depot, and they're about $50, $60 for a day on rental of them. And if you've got a small area, it's not a big deal. But after you've been on it 2 or 3 hours, it's tough. And aerating this time of year is probably what I would recommend to you. One, it's cooler, it's easier to do, and the grass is dormant, and it's just easier. It's just easier to do it.
Is that for all grasses, from St. Augustine and everything?
St. Augustine, I probably would maybe shy away from it this time of year, but it's kind of indifferent. I mean, really, the weather, if you're going to have damage from cold weather on St. Augustine, it's probably not going to be related to aeration. It's going to be related to St. Augustine, you know. So, yeah, I'd say just about everything. If I had a problem with a lawn and it was damaged or something like that, I might wait until it was growing and I could see what I was doing.
Hey, Danny?
Yes, sir.
Is aeration really, like, for example, zoysia lawn really what's required more than detach
No, those are two separate items altogether. One's to do with soil density and one's to do with organic material, built up organic material and harborage for insects and disease. That's what thatch is going to be your problem there. And the aeration is going to be about loosening the soil for the root zone and allowing nutrients in. So one thing I said, and some people have seen this, I'm sure you've seen and been out and seen the big ugly fire ant mound in your yard and noticed that the grass grows there better than anywhere else.
Aeration.
It's because it's aerated. The ants aerated it. So just look at it and you'll see what the difference is. Back to the Episcopal school, they have a play area in between their middle school and the high school, and they let all the kids run out there. And they play on the zoysia grass quad area, and they trample it to death. And they wanted us to resod that area. And I told them that we could aerate it and top dress it during the summer when they weren't there in school, and it would probably recover, and we've not had to resod that area just from aerating it, because their foot traffic was killing it, compacting the soil so much that the grass couldn't recover. And so after that, we were able to get it back on right grass, right location. That's the next thing. There is no shade-loving grass. It doesn't exist. If you're buying it, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I can't tell you. Go to the forest, find the best patch of grass there, and bring that home. That's what you need. It's not there. The best grass for shade, if you're going to have it, is probably St. Augustine. But even that, the difference is if you have a dense shaded yard and you put out Bermuda grass, 2 years from now you won't have a yard. If you have zoysia grass, 3 to 4 years you won't have a yard. If you have St. Augustine, 5, 6 years you won't have a yard. But you won't have a yard. And you're going to have to resod if you've got grass in the shade.
So cut the tree down, huh?
If you don't like, if you want your grass, the tree's got to go. You know, so that's it. I'm a proponent for flower beds at that point. You know, don't fight it. Don't keep resodding. Don't keep redoing. Don't fight it. You're not going to win. Mother Nature wins every time. So, next thing, now that we're at the point where we've done all the aeration, we've top dressed, we've mowed properly, we've done everything, we still have problems. And that is the case sometimes due to weather or something that's happened. Read and follow your directions. Do that yourself. Don't listen to your friend, your neighbor. They bought it at Home Depot. They did it this way. Just do that. Buy it. Read it, understand the label, and figure out what you're doing before you go to doing it. The 2 glugs thing is something, you know, if it says 2 ounces, don't put 3 ounces in there and think it's going to work better. It's probably just going to waste material and probably cause some damage to something. So especially on herbicides. If it's a herbicide and you're trying to kill a weed, do it by the label. If it's an insecticide, you're probably just wasting material. That's all you're doing. Just because you can buy it doesn't mean it's safe, okay? You can do some real damage to yourself and other people even if you can buy it at Home Depot, okay? So just be aware of that. Understand the label signal words. These are on all your labels, and there's one missing called warning. And what these labels do is on every insecticide, you'll look, or every pesticide, they'll have something on here, and it's a signal word. And like down here, this one says danger, okay? And it'll say that on every one of them. There'll be a caution or something. Caution is the least toxic material that's there, okay? And caution applies. I've got a label here for table salt. Stuff you put on your French fries, it says caution, okay? Why does it say caution? Well, because if you rub table salt in your eyes, it's a problem. It hurts. There's caution to take. Don't, you know, just don't be willy-nilly with it, is basically what caution means. And then you get into warning. That's, well, you know, and what these are for is for acute toxicity. Okay, that means it's going to happen right now. These signal words don't apply to how toxic it is later on down the road. Doesn't apply to how cancer causing it is. Doesn't apply to how it's going to kill fish. What it does, it applies to what it's going to do to you right now. Okay? If it's got a poison skull and crossbones on it, you probably ought to be careful with that, because it don't take much of that to do some damage. You can't buy any of that. They're not going to sell that to you as a homeowner. You have to have a license to buy those. And very few of those are even available anymore at all. And we don't use anything in our business that has anything more than a warning on it. There's none of the stuff that we use that has more than a warning. And all that's available. We don't buy a product that y'all can't buy. So we do all of our work with products you can buy yourself if you just know what they Some organic products are better than some of the inorganic products. So it just depends on what you've got. Understand those label signals and just be aware where your personal, these things all have an MSDS on them, which is a material safety data sheet. It all comes with it. If it doesn't come with it, you can Google it. It's on your phone. You know, everybody's got access to it these days. And so just read those and understand what equipment you're supposed to be wearing. Basically, don't spray in shorts and flip-flops. Use common sense, you know. If the wind's blowing 60 miles an hour, don't spray in the tree and then wonder why it's all over you, you know. If it's raining, don't spray when it's raining, you know. Don't put out your fertilizer, you know, and spread it all over the sidewalk and all over your neighbor's yard and then wonder why it burned up the neighbor's yard. When it rained, it ran off all to their place. Be careful with your stuff. If you mix it, mix what you need. Mix only what you need. If you're going to spray 2 roses, don't mix up 5 gallons of solution. You'll need it. You're wasting your time. Dispose of it properly when you're finished with it. You know, basically, the only way you can dispose of a chemical properly once you've mixed it is to use it. There's no dump for this stuff. So once you've mixed it, you've got to put it out wherever you're supposed to put it out at. So back to don't mix more than you need.
So, what about disposing? Let's talk about that. Is there, other than putting it out, as you say, whether you need it or not?
For mixed chemicals, no.
No.
There's no place to dispose of it. Not for me, not for anyone.
Okay.
Unless you want to call a hazmat biohazard team to come out and they have a permit to dump it in the dump when they're done with it. And so the next thing is on that don't mix. They do have, though, for chemicals, I'll circle back. They do have an amnesty day for chemicals that you have stored and you don't know what they are anymore. Okay? If you've got a bottle and it's all corroded, the label's gone off of it, and you think you might know what it is, but you're not real sure because it's been in there for 5 years, and you bought it at Home Depot and you don't remember, dispose of it. Don't use it because you don't remember how to use it. You don't know what it is. And they have an amnesty day once a year, and I'm sure, I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure they have a listing on their website, the waste management or someone, the city probably has on their website has a location or a time that you can bring that stuff to them. Somebody asked, well, what if I missed the day? You got to wait another year because they only do it once a year. So store it properly. Don't store anything in food containers. A lot of mixed chemicals look like milk, and if you put it in a milk jug, somebody might mistake it for milk. I don't know who does that, but apparently it's happened because they tell us that at every meeting. Don't put them in food containers. One thing too is mixed chemicals don't store and last well. You can mix your Roundup up and you're going to spray in 2 weeks. You know, you're just going to go around, you're going to keep a little Roundup mixed all the time. The water, the pH of the water actually breaks those chemicals down. And so by the time you're spraying out the 2 gallons 3 weeks later, it's probably not doing any good and you're wasting your time. You're better off to mix a half a gallon at a time and do it that way. And they're saying that that's one of the biggest problems with lawn applications is storage, long-term storage in a truck. Park the truck on a Friday full of stuff, come back, start spraying Monday, and the stuff doesn't work. And especially like me, I'm on a well. My water is alkaline, and so the alkalinity of that water breaks it down. And they don't generally adjust a whole lot on pH for water that has problems like that. So just be aware of that it'll just break down and go away sitting in the jug. Yes, ma'am.
Danny, what about chemicals that are pre-mixed in the store, sold at Home Depot? So you can buy a gallon of pre-mixed lawn killer.
I don't know about those. I don't do any of that. But basically, I would say once you've opened it, it's probably lost a lot of its efficacy.
Even though it's in one of those vacuum?
Yeah, I would say that.
Really?
I would say that they probably adjusted the pH to make it as neutral as they can, but it's all going to go bad eventually. It probably has a longer shelf life than other things because it's formulated that way. But I would say that if you're going to buy it, you probably ought to use it fairly quickly. You're not mixing it with your water, so there's not that variable. And so if they're mixing it with their water, maybe it's better. I don't know. I don't use any pre-mixed stuff basically because it costs too much. I mean, you can buy, if you're spraying Roundup, you can buy a mix of Roundup and mix up 20 gallons for the cost of 1 gallon at the store, so. Next thing, we're going to talk about insecticides. If you noticed, all these have sides on the ends of them. That's because they kill stuff. Everything that has side on it kills something. And not all that's bad, but it does, just understand, they all kill something. They're either killing weeds, they're insects, funguses, mites, nematodes, and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about in a minute about the classes of insecticides and that kind of thing. Basically, insecticides are non-selective. Most all of them are. So whatever you spray to kill bug X usually kills bug Y if you put it out in the wrong place. Herbicides are really selective. A lot of them are. Some are non-selective. Roundup is non-selective. It kills pretty much everything you spray it on. Okay. The thing about Roundup is, even though it's a non-selective herbicide, it has really not many effects on aquatic invertebrates or fish or birds or anything like that. It's really not that toxic to organisms other than plants. So it's really good on a broad spectrum of plants, but it's pretty safe for you to use. They make a label for it to spray in water to kill lily pads. And so you can spray it in your pond as long as you're using their aquatic label, which is no different than they put aquatic label on it than the other Roundup. And it doesn't kill anything. Matter of fact, we went to a bird place down in South Arkansas, and the game and fish was out just spraying Roundup on all the lily pads in this whole lake, so that people could fish. Birds love the lily pads. Fishermen don't, so they kill the lily pads. But they really weren't harming the fish or the birds by doing that because Roundup's fairly safe. Fungicides, they're very expensive. They come in systemics, and they come in, and so do your insecticides and herbicides too. They all come in either contact insecticides or systemic insecticides, or they come in basically those different formulations. You've got liquids, you've got powders, you've got granules. There's all different ways to put all this stuff out. The reason they do all of those things is because the same insecticide can be put out in multiple ways, and the reason they do that is so that the application is where the key is to this. Okay, putting out the application in the right way is more important than what chemical you're using most of the time. So, say you're wanting to treat for crepe myrtle bark scale. Everybody's heard about this. Okay, this crepe myrtle bark scale is a real problem. It's getting on everybody's crepe myrtles, and if you don't have it, you're probably going to get it. Okay, the product that you can put it out can be put out as a liquid. It can be put out as a powder. It can be put out as a granule. All those things. The active ingredient that does the job on these can all be put out that way. Okay, but spraying the foliage of a big crepe myrtle in the middle of bloom season guarantees you killed every bee within 10 miles of there. Okay, so don't do that. The label will tell you if you read it, don't do that. But most people don't read the label. They grab it and they say, kill scale, good to go. We're going to do that. And they go to spray it. And you can spray foliage. And it is okay to spray foliage, it's just not flowering foliage. So it's the flowers that's the problem. The bees come to the flowers. You sprayed the flowers. Now the bees get it and they die from it. Okay? And the same product was developed for social insects. And so it was originally a termite chemical. And so it was designed for one termite to go through it and then carry it to all the other termites and kill them. Well, the bees work in the same way. They just fly around instead of crawl around. And so when you start applying it to flowering plants, the same method of toxicity happens to all those bees that it did with the termites. And so, but that product is about the only thing systemically that works really well on plants. And it's in everything.
What is that product? What did you say?
It's called imidacloprid. Okay, imidacloprid. Imidacloprid.
They sell it here?
Yes. And it's like I said, if it's got Bayer on it, it probably has it in it. Everything with Bayer, that's a Bayer product, and it's a really good product for doing what you need to do, but it's needs to be handled like it's, to you and I, it's frontline on dogs. Anybody have a dog? Anybody put frontline on their dog? It's the same product. It's the same thing they treated your house for termites with. They treat all kinds of crops with it. It's used everywhere. It's probably one of the most widely used chemicals available today, okay? And it's perfectly fine as long as you're not spraying flowering plants. So, but most people will go down to Home Depot and buy this, and they'll spray it willy-nilly because they didn't read the label. Read the label, read the label, read the label. That's the biggest thing.
Why don't they make like that front line for humans? Can't they still keep the
Pigs and ticks and.
You probably could. I wouldn't try it. But you probably could. I'm sure it would work just the same way.
It works for dogs.
It does work for
We
dogs.
should make one for humans, and we wouldn't have to spray ourselves with oil.
The thing I would say about that is that even the front line is not repellent for the dogs. The difference is the dog gets bit and the tick dies afterwards. So it would be the equivalent of you going out and just, the mosquitoes are biting me, but at least they're dying. And so that's the way it works. It doesn't repel them off the dog. The poor dog still gets bit. He just doesn't bring them in the house. So it's really for you and not the dog.
Do you do any spraying for customers to keep ticks out of their property?
No, I don't. That's a pest control issue. I could. I'm licensed to do it, but I don't do it. And that's something too. If you mow your grass regularly, you probably won't have many ticks. Tall grass is where you're going to have tick problems. You've got miticides. If you've got spider mites on your plants, usually your insecticides don't work on those. They're different. They're arachnids. And for some reason, you have to have a miticide to kill those. So you have to have a different product if you get spider mites. Yes.
And would it be safe though to use that systemic,
Mhm.
ground granules or something going up into a flowering crepe myrtle, but not while it's flowering, while it's dormant? Would then,
yes.
when it does flower in the spring, would that still hurt the bees or butterflies?
Here's the thing. They say it is.
It's
But
safer.
they say it's okay to do that. They say that the insecticide is not transferred to the nectar in an amount that does damage to the bees. I don't know if I believe that or not. I don't know that I don't believe that. I just don't have enough information to say so. But they have said, yes, it's safe to do that. Okay? So, but I'd said this earlier too. They used to put DDT on soldiers for lice and fleas and stuff like that, and they don't do that anymore either because they found out later it was not the good thing to do. So some of these chemicals haven't been around long enough to figure out all the things that are wrong with them later on down the road. So there again, be cautious. Don't spray in shorts.
What about soapy water?
Soapy water works great on a lot of stuff. And the insecticidal soaps, a lot of dormant oils, things like she's talking about, basically they work well on insects. The practicality for some of the things like the crepe myrtle bark scale, if your crepe myrtle's 60 feet, it's hard to get soapy water up there. And so you almost have to do it. One of the recommendations from the Extension Service was to go and scrub all those insects off of the plant. It's an impossible task. I mean, I had customers asking me if we were going to do that. And I was like, there's no way we can scrub your crepe myrtles. We can't. I know that's what they said do, but we're not doing that. We can't. And so, but we have found out that through using an organic, like dormant oil, it's just basic paraffin oil, okay, paraffinic oil. You spray that in the wintertime, it smothers about 3/4 of the insects. Spray it on all the exposed stems. It's great for all your scales. It's the same treatment we've been using for years for scale. And it takes care of a lot of other insects too that harbor over the winter on your plants. And it's just, you basically mix it in water, spray it out, and it's like spraying a liquid wax on them. And that kills about 60% of the bugs that were there overwintering. So your population to start off with in the spring is much, much lower by doing that. And it's super cheap and almost non-toxic. Yes, sir.
Is that a product that could be used for weeds coming through a gravel road?
You're talking about the
Dormant oil?
no, it wouldn't work at all on weeds. It's just for insects. It's just for insects. But if you do that with the dormant oil and then you couple that with a systemic insecticide in the springtime, we've eliminated some of the crepe myrtle bark scale in some of the trees that we've had. We've had some success, which is like, well, we didn't know we could do that. So yes,
Should we start using the insecticide for preventive crepe?
I would if you're in West Little Rock, yes. If you're in West Little Rock, if you don't have bark scale, you're going to get it. That's just all there is to it. I've seen it spread. About 4 years ago, it showed up in West Little Rock in the Sugar Maple off of Sandpack area, and now it's everywhere. And I've seen it in the Heights even.
Yeah, I've seen it across the street, but I don't have it on mine yet.
You will if you don't treat. And the thing about treating with the systemic insecticide is it works on the metabolism of the plant. And so if the plant's not actively growing, it's not taking anything up. And so putting it out today would be useless because it would just disperse into the soil and eventually go away, and the plant wouldn't draw it up because it's gone before the plant could. So you need to apply just before bud break, 2 to 3 weeks before bud break. So if you think your crepe myrtles are just going to start blooming out or coming out, putting on foliage in April, mid-April or late March, then you want to do it at the beginning of March.
So right now, you would use the dormant oil.
Yes, use the dormant oil. Don't use dormant oil during the summer. It'll burn everything up. It's like spraying motor oil on everything in the summertime.
Should you put that dormant oil out on, even if you haven't seen any signs?
It's a good thing. You're really not going to harm anything with dormant oil, and it's going to prevent a lot of insects. So if you're trying to do that. Organics versus synthetics. Some organics, as I said, are better, and some synthetics are better. Just depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to do it with, and what formulation you're using it in. Plant growth regulators and insect growth regulators. A lot of people don't even know what those are. A plant growth regulator, they make things that you can spray on your ivy and stop it from growing for about 6 to 8 weeks. Or if you've got all these beautiful topiary plants, you can spray them and you don't have to prune them the rest of the summer. It's really not that harmful to them. And you can spray grass, like if you've got a hillside that you're having to mow and it's really hard work, you can spray that grass and it'll stop the growth on that grass for a while. There again, read the label, understand the directions, do it like it's supposed to be done. Yes, sir?
Would that PGR work on kudzu?
Yes, it would slow it down. You'd have to probably, because of the growth rate of kudzu, you probably have to apply it at the highest rate available. But it would slow it down, yes. The insect growth regulators, if you've ever had a flea treatment, if you got a dog, you've had fleas. And if you've ever had a flea treatment in the house, if they did the job right, they put an insect growth regulator in there to stop the eggs. And so there are different ways. You don't have to kill the adults to stop the cycle, because the adults will eventually die off, but most people want the adults gone then too. So, all right, insecticides, organics. Has anybody heard of neem? It's an oil. It's an organic insecticide. It's probably one of the best ones. River Valley sells it, and it's an organic oil, and it does a really good job with whiteflies, aphids, things like that on your gardenias, roses, that kind of stuff. It's good for that. And I found we use it in a rotation for whiteflies during the summer. We do, and it's got kind of a pleasant smell. But one thing I want to point out is that because it's an organic doesn't mean it's safe. It doesn't mean it's safe. It's still an insecticide. It's still killing stuff. It's still going to cause damage if you misuse it. Pyrethrum is the extract of a Shasta daisy. Shasta daisies don't seem that toxic. They sound like a great thing, and an extract out of that ought to be great, and it is. It's an excellent insecticide. It has no discrimination on what it kills, though. If you spray it on a bee, it's a dead bee, okay? But also, if you drip that into your koi pond on the way to spray that bee, all your fish are dead. It's organic, but it's deadly to fish. It's deadly to frogs. It's deadly to salamanders, anything in the water, basically. So it's organic, but it's not necessarily safe because and now here's the other thing. Pyrethrum, though, you can basically take a bath in it. It's not going to do anything to you, because it has a toxicity level in people that's so far off the scale that it's really almost non-toxic. Don't recommend taking a bath in it because it's a chemical. But like castor beans, I don't know if y'all know what those are. A lot of people plant them. They're pretty plants, but the beans that come off of them are toxic. You can kill somebody with the ricin that comes out of those easily. Oleanders, anybody plant oleanders during the summer? Those are toxic too. They're summertime plants. You go to Florida and they're everywhere up and down the beach. They plant them everywhere. That's one of their ornamental plants down there, but they're toxic. So just because it's organic doesn't mean it's not toxic. Synthetics, pyrethroids, neonicotinoids, That imidacloprid that we talked about, that's a neonicotinoid. That's one of the ones that causes the social insect problem, and you need to be aware of when you're using it. Really good products, but you need to be careful when you're using them. Same thing with, there's another one called fipronil that's Advantage flea and tick stuff for dogs. Really good stuff, works great on fire ants, on any ants, but you know, don't spray it around your bees. Biologicals. There's something to be said for things that a lot of people are scared of biological insecticides, but this is a bacteria that you put out on top of, you sprinkle it on top of the leaves, and it'll take care of tomato worms and caterpillars and things like that. Does a really good job with those. And it's not harmful to you. Been using it for years. People think biologicals, they think that's something new that's been developed. This stuff's been around for decades.
Tomato, cornworm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes care of hornworms. And now I will say this about the hornworms and things like that. A lot of your insecticides, you have to think about what you're trying to do. If you're applying an insecticide to the soil to prevent grasshoppers, you're probably not going to be successful because they fly. They're going to land on your stuff and eat it all to pieces, and by the time he gets on the ground, he's going to die, but he's basically done the damage. So you're back to where you were. You sprayed the insecticide, yeah, I killed some grasshoppers, but I still didn't save my plant. So if you're trying to stop things that chew and eat on things, if you've got hibiscus, anybody got hibiscus? Every year hibiscus get eaten up by grasshoppers. I mean, they're just a big shredded mess of leaves. Same thing with cannas. They get on cannas and eat those up, and then they come out all twisted and ugly. And you have to spray a repellent on those, which would be the pyrethrum or the pyrethroid of some sort, to stop them from getting on them because it repels them. And basically it doesn't last over 3 or 4 days when you spray it on there. The sunlight breaks it down, and it's gone due to sunlight breakdown. But it does that job. You don't need a systemic to kill caterpillars, because the thing about it is he's got to eat the plant to die. So you put the Bayer Advance out and you sprinkle it all over the ground. Everything on your yard is toxic to bugs, but they still eat it. They still die. It's not as much damage, but you still had the damage. So you have to think about, what am I trying to get rid of? What am I trying to cure? And most of the time it'll tell you on the label how to use their product. And if you don't, you can ask me. I'll be glad to help you. Let's see here.
Go back to that one just a minute.
All right.
The Bayer Advanced Tree and Shrub Insect Control.
This.
Which one of those is it?
That's what I said. Almost all of them, if it says insect control on it, it's got the same product in it.
Okay.
They're all the same. Like this flower and rose care, same stuff.
Okay.
Same stuff. The Bayer tree shrub, basically the Bayer puts a label on it, calls it tree stuff. They put rose stuff on it. It's all the same stuff.
So buy the cheapest one.
Pretty
But
much.
the tree stuff usually says like use it once a year, and the rose stuff is like every 8 weeks or something.
Right.
So which one?
Yes. The thing about it is that the way the systemics work is that if it's available in the soil during rapid growth periods, then it's taken into the growth stems, okay? And a tree, like an oak tree, generally will leaf out and stay that way, and it doesn't keep growing throughout the course of the year. It just buds out, leaves out, and then holds on to those leaves, and it gets one big growth spurt. So for your trees, if you treated them early, then that would take care of it. But it's not necessarily the chemical that you're talking about. It's the plant that you're applying it to that makes the difference, because the roses continually grow throughout the year, and that chemical has to be available for uptake at that time when that new growth comes out. Because when you put it out once early in the spring, then all the old growth on the roses is protected, but the new stuff is not, because it's not there for a take up. And so that's why you have to, that's why the rose will tell you to apply it every 8 weeks, or that's the reason why. So. Back to non-selectives, your treatment method is more important than the insecticide. Back to that. If you're putting out dust and granules for things that fly, you're not going to be very successful. If you're treating in the cracks and crevices and they run across the surfaces, you're not going to get them. You just need to be aware of, you need to know about your enemy. You need to know where this insect harbors and what it's doing, or disease is at, and what causes the disease, and try to correct all the problems that causes all those problems first. And then approach it and say, well, I know if I've got this disease X in the yard, and it's because I'm overwatering every day, and I've stopped overwatering, and I fixed all my problems, and I've still got the disease, then I know if it's a root problem, I need to treat the roots. So I need to put a granular product out that'll get down to the roots. So if I spray the leaves and it never gets to them, I didn't do any good. So it's about the application method. Insects is pest control. A lot of people have lady beetles, praying mantis, and lacewings and things like that they buy to help control. That's not a bad idea, but remember, if you spray something, you wipe those out too. So if you're going that way, you need to be reserved to the fact that these little guys need something to eat. And if they're going to last and protect your yard, then there's always going to be something there for them to eat. So you have to have a certain level of expectation of some kind of pest. I'm going to have some bugs, but they're not going to be enough that it bothers me so much. And really, when it comes down to it, that's where do I need to spray everything? Do I need to kill every weed? Does it really bother me that much that I have a bug? And so you have to make that decision yourself and say, nah, it really doesn't bother me, you know? Or, yeah, it really does bother me. That's my grandmother's old gardenia, and it's got whiteflies, and it's going to die, and I want that plant to live because it's important to me. So I'm going to spray that one. But that other gardenia, I don't care about. It's going to die. And so you make that decision. Yes?
Well, my problem is those grubs.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get rid of the grubs. They say, well, the armadillos come in, they're looking for the grubs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to get rid of the grubs, not only because of that, because you plant something, and pretty soon the plant's gone, you can look, the root system's gone because of
Right.
the grub. But if you put the grub killer down, it kills the earthworms and everything else.
Yes.
So what do we do?
It's a vicious cycle.
You
And
just said
there's
the
no,
best way to get rid of an armadillo is to get rid of its food source.
that's correct.
I mean, they'll dig around for a while, if they're not getting enough to eat, they'll go find somewhere else.
Here's the thing I found out about that. The gun's the best solution. The thing about armadillos and raccoons and things that dig they always come late summer. That problem always crops up late summer on you. And they start digging in your yard late summer. And the reason they do that is not necessarily because there's more grubs and worms at that time period. It's because you're the only place watering. Everything else is dry. And if you go out there and try to dig in the hard dirt for a worm, it's a long ways to a worm through hard dirt. But it's not very far in your wet flower bed with lots of pretty mulch to dig for a new worm. And they don't care that your plants were planted there. They don't care what's in there. They want the worm. And so that's your thing. And here's the thing, you're not gonna apply enough insecticide, and let me say this, you're probably gonna run out of money before you apply enough insecticide to get rid of the food source. And so when the armadillos show up, you're just a slave to them. That's just all there is to it. I have fought them every year. I have been frustrated by them every year because I'm in the middle of the woods with a pretty landscaped, nice little oasis, and I can't be mad because I attracted everything to my little oasis.
And they're aerating your yard.
Yeah, they're aerating for you.
No, they tear it up.
I've got holes all in my yard due to armadillos and raccoons from last year.
No, I wanted to tell you
Yes.
a story about that armadillo.
Okay, thank you.
This armadillo just tearing up the whole beautiful yard. And so I bought a stealth camera, one of those, put it out there, you set it and everything, and, you do the little test to make sure it's on. Next day, I go out there, get the little camera card out of it, and I was all excited because I thought, well, if I knew what time a little booger came into my yard every night,
I can take care
I'll
of
be out there and I'll be ready for it. The only thing I had a picture of the next day is me walking away from the stealth camera.
them. Right.
Every single day.
Yeah. Well, the armadillos, it's raccoons that do the same thing too, though. The armadillos got a really bad rap around my place, and I blamed the armadillos, and I found out that it was raccoons. And so I feed the birds. I feed them a lot, and the raccoons love my bird seed, and they like worms better than bird seed. And hey, I invited them in. They're my problem. I created my own problem. Yes, sir.
Coyote urine works around the perimeter.
It might.
I think it does.
If it does, I'll try it. I'll
It
try
works on
it.
raccoon.
I got you. I'll try it because I'm coyote urine.
I tried that, but then after.
It didn't work?
It works for a little while.
One thing, the host for beneficial species and pollinators, if you've got an area outside of your landscape that is wooded or something like that, don't go clear it. Don't go out there and just tear everything down. Leave all that stuff up, because the ecosystem works with all those plants in it. It was balanced before we got there and did our little thing with it, okay? And it'll rebalance itself if we'll leave it alone. And this little guy shows up in my yard every year, and I take pictures of him. And the reason he shows up there is because in the spring, I got caterpillars, and I don't kill them. And the caterpillars have never done enough damage to my trees or my shrubs to make me want to run him off. So I don't spray, and I haven't sprayed my yard in about 4 years. Ever
I
since.
haven't either, and I actually found some frogs last year.
Yeah, and I've got frogs. I got a huge frog that gets in my swimming pool every night. and I have to fish him out every day. And so, but the thing is that I got rid of a lot of plants that caused me problems. Euonymus. Does anybody have euonymus? If you got euonymus, it gets scale. Matter of fact, they call it euonymus scale because it gets on that plant. And it'll get on other plants. And it'll get on azaleas. Basically, it's really a camellia problem when they're close to it. But don't plant euonymus and then turn around and plant a camellia beside it, because you guarantee the camellia is going to get the problem too. And I've got a camellia that got scale on it. I looked at it and I said, you got to go. Out it went. And it's not there anymore. I don't have scale. I don't have to spray it because I don't have the host for it anymore. And that's not the solution to all bug problems. It's not. If you have army worms that show up in your yard in the fall, you got to spray them. If you don't, you won't have a yard. It'll all be gone, every bit of it. You know, so there are sometimes you do have to spray. If you can't go out into your yard because you've got ticks and fleas so bad because you're feeding the birds and the raccoons are coming and bringing them in every day, then you probably ought to spray your yard. But remember, when you spray your yard, you're spraying the ground where all the birds are picking around and getting their seed. So just remember what you're doing. Think about it. And if spray a little perimeter, you know, or get rid of the raccoons, or put out just enough bird feed for them at night.
I heard chili pepper does a number on them.
I tried that.
It didn't work.
I didn't work at all. I planted 500 tulips this fall, and I have probably 50 tulips left because the raccoons got in and dug. I put them all in containers in pots, and one of these beautiful displays of flowers this spring. And I got up every day, and there would be chewed up bulbs on the ground, dirt everywhere. All the pansies and cabbages are out. It's a terrible mess. I'm mad as I can be. And I went out there with the big Kroger, big value red pepper, dumped it all over everything till they were red. Next morning, flower bulbs, dirt, everything everywhere. It's like, well, oh well, I give up. So I don't have flowers anymore. So herbicides, pre-emergence. We talked about that. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you're wanting to cure weeds, prevent them before you have to spray the new ones. You're not going to prevent them all. Put out a pre-emergent. It's the least invasive way to prevent your weeds and keep a pretty yard. Just remember, you have seasons of weeds. They're going to be, you know, you're going to have to do it more than once. You're going to have to do it spring and fall if you're going to control your weeds throughout the year. If you're going to do a pre-emergent, use this all-season stuff here, and or another product that has the same active ingredient in it, and that'll help you control it. If you're going to use corn gluten, then you need to do it probably every 3 to 4 weeks to prevent your weeds. Post-emergence, there's that pound to cure stuff. You're going to have to work a lot harder killing stuff after it's already come up, so try to prevent it. If you're using a non-selective herbicide, Roundup, everything goes with it. Be careful what you spray it on. Some herbicides like Clean Pasture DF, you can spray it on a lawn and it'll kill broadleaf weeds, and you use it only at 1/3 of an ounce per acre. It's not very much. It's not very impactful to the environment, but it does a good job in cleaning up the weeds. But the toxicity to all the little animals that run through it's pretty low. So that's a good product to use. We use it. The organics, on fertilizers, organics are generally better, okay, if you can use them. But don't expect that they work immediately. They're not fast. Organics takes, you're cultivating soils, you're cultivating a better biosome in your grass and your flower beds and all of that. So your grass is not going to be the greenest yard on the lot if you're using organics, but it'll be the healthiest one down the road. And it'll take 2 to 3 years of treating with those to get you where you want to be, but you will get there. Yes?
Have you ever used malarganite
I have, and I like it.
I do too.
It's a good product. Most people are put off by what it is.
It stinks.
Mill organite, does anybody know what that is? Everybody heard of it?
How do you spell it?
Milorganite, I think. Milorganite, ITE. Milorganite.
And we carry that too here.
And they carry it. It is the human waste sludge from the city of Milwaukee. It has been dried, it has been treated, it has been pelletized, and it is basically a safe product at that point. But it has all of the nutrients that you can imagine in it. It's good stuff. It works really well if you have rabbit problems. If you have rabbit problems, it helps with rabbits. It doesn't fix rabbits, but it helps with rabbits. You have to use multiple avenues to combat rabbits. But with your deer and rabbit repellent and mill organite, we do a pretty good job of keeping them out. And it's a really good fertilizer. It'll help your flower beds be a lot better. Matter of fact, we use that and another product on our shrub applications. That's what we use. And so it's a good.
Does it smell just when you're putting it down?
It really does. It has an odor, but it's not that odor you're used to.
Well, I put out too much one year. I put out, it doesn't burn. I put
No, it
out-
won't burn anything.
And my neighbors were saying, there's some kind of odor in the neighborhood.
And there is. It does.
I really didn't like this neighbor anyway.
Yeah. Anyways.
So if you don't like your neighbors, put it out.
Put it out. But it's a really good product, and I like it, and I would promote it. Non-organics, some of them are more toxic than others, and you need to read your labels. What to take home from this? Great landscapes are work. You're not going to have a beautiful, pristine yard. You're not going to have a manicured, topiary, Disneyland-looking place if you don't manicure it. That's all there is to it. You're not going to have that look if you don't work in it. And healthy landscapes are balanced landscapes, so don't plant all of one thing. Have a variety of plants, have a variety of stuff for all the little creatures to enjoy and for you to enjoy. You'll be happier with it because it's more interesting. It'll have different things that are going on at different times of the year, and it's prettier in my mind. Balanced landscapes use minimal
Do you
chemicals.
think that applies to vegetable gardens? also?
Yes, absolutely, everything. Everything, I would say so. The minimal chemicals are used. Don't use them unless you have to. You know, if you've tried everything else, and it shouldn't be your first thing as you go grab the jug. You should look at what you're doing first, analyze your situation, make sure that you're doing the things that are right first. You're feeding it, you've got the right soil, you've changed the conditions, you're watering right, you got the right plant, right location, and you're doing all that stuff. And if you're doing all that and you got a problem, then grab the can. All chemicals aren't bad. You shouldn't be scared. You know, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I don't use anything but all organics in my yard, that's fine. That's understandable. I get that. That's a matter of opinion. That doesn't necessarily mean they're right. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just the same as somebody likes a red door on their house and I don't. That doesn't make the red door wrong. It makes it wrong for me, but it doesn't make it wrong. So just to understand that. This is something that we're doing with the Green Industry Association. I wanted to promote. It's an Arkansas Diamond. Right now we've introduced annual plants that are better suited for Arkansas conditions. They're also grown in Arkansas by Arkansas growers. So keep it local. These plants are grown here, they're better for here, and they're transported less, and they're greener for you, okay? They'll help you become a better gardener. Right now they're just annuals, okay? So we introduced the first thing that most people buy in the spring, which is pansies and flowers and things like that for color. We are going to introduce these plants in perennial form, in tree form, and shrub form, all of that. We're going to get to that if this program is successful. If y'all support it, we'll develop it. Janet Carson is helping us promote that. She talked about them last year. She's talking about them again. There'll be a display of these at the Flower and Garden Show. You'll be able to see them. River Valley sells them. They're a supporter of this. And me being on the Green Industry Association, it's my obligation to tell you about them. And they've got a display over here that shows some of the plants. You can go to the Green Industry website and see these plants, what's available. And it'll be a continuing growing list as we continue and grow. So if y'all support us, we'll make a better list and we'll get you some better things. Yes?
You know, we saw the Arkansas Diamonds at last year's Flower and Garden Show,
Mhm.
and bought, quite a few of those, and just tremendous success.
Good.
With
Glad to
all
hear
of
that.
those. It was wonderful, so we were just really glad to hear they're gonna do the same thing with perennials and so
Yeah,
forth.
we're going to do that, and I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that.
I want to ask you a question about, you're talking about so many of the POAs require zoysia.
Mhm.
Do you see that because it is so everywhere that it'll get more and more disease prone, just like the red tips?
Yes. Yeah, it's basically if you're mowing grass every day on zoysia grass and you're going from one zoysia grass yard to the other, then you have the ability to infect the next zoysia grass yard with your lawnmower. So yes, anytime you have a monoculture, you're going to have monoculture problems. And so if people had zoysia Bermuda, St. Augustine, fescue, all these different yards around, there would probably be less problems with disease. But I'll say this, 90% of the disease I see is created by the homeowner. And most of it's from poor planting, and poor drainage on a yard, or they don't mow right, or they fertilize in between our fertilization because they want it to look greener, or they turn the sprinkler on, water every day, and that's the way it waters all year. Spring, summer, winter, and fall. When it comes on, it waters every day. When it goes off, it was watered every day. Yes, sir.
Hey, I've mulched some raw land, and I think I took a step back because this is taking over.
Privet.
Trivet,
Yep.
and how do you kill it?
Well, basically something that's in this will kill it. It's 2,4-D. It's a broadleaf herbicide that'll kill it. It'll kill it.
Down to the roots.
Yes, and you can spray it. Just understand that everything you're spraying it in that's tangled in its roots is probably going to die too. So if you've got trees there you like, you're probably going to damage some trees. You probably won't kill them, but you'll damage them with it. But the privet, to me, I leave the privet on my property because the birds like it. If it's taking over and it's becoming a nuisance, I get it. It can be mown if you've got a mower, if you can get to it. If it's not so rough you can't mow it. My area is too rough to mow. So I would have to get in and manually cut it all out and clean it all up and then spray it and keep it dead. And I did that when I first started on my property. I cleared it out and made it park-like. I really liked the look of it. And then I started looking at birds and figuring out that the birds like it, and I like it now too. So, and a lot of people are big enemies of privet and honeysuckle, and they say it should all be eradicated from the face of the earth and you should get rid of it. It's doing pretty good in my yard. I have a different opinion. So, not a good one, not a bad one, it's just my opinion. Go ahead.
What's the name of that product you use?
To get rid of the privet, 2,4-D.
Someone told me to use Roundup. I'm building a new flower bed.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, isn't that gonna kill what I put in it?
The Roundup works through foliar action, okay? So if you apply it to actively growing foliage, it's redistributed through the plant, okay? If the plant, if you don't spray it on the plants, generally you won't have a problem with it because it doesn't last in the soil, okay? So it's not gonna last long when you apply it. If you sprayed your area with grass and then planted in it the next day, yes, you would have problems. But if you wait a week, you're fine. Which if you're spraying for grass, you need to wait anyways and make sure it's dead.
Okay, so and then I just would till it out and pull the dry grass out and it would be fine.
Right, and if the grass is not actively growing and it's not warm enough, you're wasting your time.
Okay.
I mean, I've got a guy that wants me to remodel a property of his. He's got a big new sign they put in, and he wants some stuff planted around it, and it's all Bermuda grass around this whole sign. And he said, we need to get this done next 2 weeks. I said, sure, you're gonna have Bermuda grass all in it when it comes up in spring. He's like, well, can't you dig it out? No. I'll leave one sprig and you'll have Bermuda grass all in it. As anybody knows that's planted where there's Bermuda grass, it comes right back. You can't get rid of it. Same thing with monkey grass. Yes. Nutsedge.
I think it was brought to us by someone who planted our landscape.
Most likely it was.
Sandy loam.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
And after a while, it started finding a way to come around our shrubs.
Yes.
What do we do?
The nutsedge, you're exactly right. It did come in your soil. And sandy loam from the river is one of the primary places I see it come in new landscapes especially. Every time you till or work that soil, you're exposing those nutsedge seeds to sunlight, which causes them to germinate, and you have more. And you pull it, and you have more. So really the only way to eradicate nutsedge is to work feverishly or to spray a product called Certainty or Sedge Hammer. There's a lot of different, there's sulfuron chemical. But Certainty is your better product for it. And it's labeled also for the over-the-top spray on some shrubs. Be careful. But you know, you can spray it over, like I sprayed some azaleas one time and it didn't have any effect on the azaleas. Killed all the nut grass.
We have Carissa holly and another holly.
It'll probably be pretty safe on those. But what I would recommend is find a little section, spray it on there first, and then see what happens to the holly. And if that leaf dies and curls up, then don't spray it anymore on it. You know, it's not going to be systemic and work through the whole plant and just kill whatever you sprayed it on, but it does work in the flower beds and it will kill the nutsedge. The problem with nutsedge is that even if you spray it and it looks dead, it will come back for probably a year and a half or 2 years of regular spraying.
So if I wanted to make a little vegetable garden where I have a little patch of nutsedge, just to skip that up? Yeah. Or you could put down landscape fabric and poke holes in the landscape fabric and plant your plants in those holes and then just work those areas.
An iris bed that's got weeds,
Mm-hmm.
nutsedge and all sorts of weeds in it.
Right.
Is there a chemical solution or just dig it out?
No, it's that's one of the main questions I get asked on maintenance is, what can I spray in my flower beds to clean them all up? These.
Okay.
The problem with pre-emergence in flower beds is that almost all of the seeds that germinate in there are large, and pre-emergence aren't designed to take care of large seeds. So little oak tree saplings, little pine trees, privet hedge, all of those little things that come up in all your flower beds and in your ground covers aren't protected. You're not protected with pre-emergence. And so you put out your pre-emergent and the bed looks just like it did. And people who have grass problems, it usually is running from underneath the ground and popping up in your flower beds. And so you still have grass. And so people put out pre-emergent, they still have grass. And they go, well, these pre-emergents don't work. They're doing fine for what they're supposed to do, but you're just not applying it right. You're not doing you're not after the right thing. And acorns you just can't prevent. They're going to come up. The best thing you can do is get them out of your flower beds when they fall, and don't let them lay there in the winter. And so if the problem with all your herbicides is that either they're non-selective or they're broadleaf herbicides, and irises are broadleafs. And so if you kill the weeds, you're probably killing the irises. And irises are easy enough to dig up though. They're right on top of the ground. The best thing would be I would dig my irises up, store them because they'll last however long nearly you want to store them, and spray that whole thing and then put them back. And you can do that basically with your garden, is go out there, spray it, kill everything in it, till it, let it come up again, spray it, kill it again, do that 3 or 4 times, and you'll reduce your weed problem by probably 3/4, but you'll still have weeds. Not so bad though. But it'll take a season of preparing it. And you can compost and do all kinds of organic stuff, getting it ready then. You can do that. So, any other questions?
Oh, I got one more weed that showed up on my dam, so now we got a dam. And this stuff just sticks to it, and it bites you.
I'd have to look at it. Come, let me see what it is.
And it just showed up all of a sudden. And I assume each one of those is the spring seed.
Yeah, it's a burr weed is what it is. That's clean pasture DF. You spray that and it'll kill that.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's a nasty little guy.
Yeah.
Anybody want to take that home with them? So.
I did not. And what is the clean pasture ingredient?
It's metsulfuron methyl, or MSM.
Oh, MSC.
MSM.
We don't have anything comparable.
I don't think you do. It's available. You can get it through BWI.
Okay.
They can get the Clean Pasture DF or MSM through VWI. So if y'all are interested in getting it, just tell him and he can get an order.
You bought it at Farmers Association?
Yeah, I bought it at the farm co-op. Basically, they're supplied by VWI.
Yeah.
Same people. So anyhow, but that product is about as safe for, the one thing you need to understand about the MSM or the Clean Pasture is it does have a toxicity to oak trees. So don't spray it under all your oak trees where you have a bunch of grass and a bunch of oak trees. Be careful with it around those. So,
Would bush killer work on trivet
yes.
better than 24D?
No, the 2,4-D is brush killer.
Okay,
Same thing.
thanks.
Same thing. That's it.
Any more questions?
Thank y'all. Hope I didn't bore you too much.
Thank you.